Welcome to our deep dive into eco-friendly gardening.
It's great to be here.
You're looking for practical ways to make your garden like a haven for the planet, right?
hmm
You're going to explore some seriously cool techniques that are not only good for the environment, but can actually amp up your garden's style too.
Yeah. It's fascinating how eco-friendly gardening really kind of flips the script on what a perfect garden should be.
Okay.
We're not aiming for a sterile, manicured look.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, it's about creating a thriving ecosystem that's both beautiful and beneficial to the environment.
Okay. I'm all about ditching the perfectly manicured lawn.
Yeah.
But where do we even start?
Um,
Let's talk planning and design. I always
Yeah.
get overwhelmed just thinking about it.
well, think of it like this. You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint, right?
Right.
The
Yeah.
same goes for a garden, especially an eco-friendly one.
Okay.
You need to understand your space first.
Okay.
Things like sunlight patterns and your soil's personality, so to speak.
Sunlight patterns, soil personality. I'm loving these analogies.
Yeah.
But seriously, how much detail do we need to get into?
You don't need a degree in soil science, don't worry. For sunlight, even just observing your garden throughout the day can give you a good idea of how much sun different areas receive.
Okay.
You can even use a free app to track it if you want to get super precise.
Oh, a sun tracking app. I'm already
Yeah.
geeking out. What about soil?
Yeah.
Do I need to send it to a lab for full-blown analysis?
A simple DIY test using vinegar and baking soda can tell you a lot about your soil's pH level,
Okay.
which is key for understanding what plants will thrive there.
Okay.
And trust me, it's way more fun than it sounds.
Okay.
It's like a little science experiment in your own backyard.
Okay. You've convinced me to embrace my inner soil scientist.
What?
But once we know about sunlight and soil, how do we decide what to plant?
This is where the concept of native plant landscaping comes in. Imagine plants that are practically begging to live in your garden because they've evolved to thrive in your specific climate and soil conditions.
Mm-hmm.
That means less watering, fewer pests, and a happy, low-maintenance garden.
So native plants are basically like the ultimate eco-warriors.
Precisely.
Okay.
Plus, they attract local pollinators and wildlife, boosting biodiversity right in your backyard.
Okay. I'm sold on native plants. But let's be real. Design is about more than just choosing the right plants.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make sure our gardens are both eco-friendly and aesthetically pleasing?
Well, there's this concept called water-wise zones that
Mhm.
can really elevate your garden's design and functionality.
Okay.
It's about grouping plants with similar water needs together.
So we're not just randomly scattering plants wherever we think they look good.
Not if we want an efficient and water-saving garden. Think of it like creating little plant communities based on their thirst levels. You'll have a designated zone for those thirsty guys who love a good soak, and another for the drought-tolerant champs who prefer to sip their water.
Okay. I can see how that would save water and make watering a lot easier.
Yeah.
But beyond plants and water, what else can we consider during the design phase?
Think about creating little havens for wildlife. You don't need a sprawling estate to make a difference.
Okay.
Even a small bird feeder, a bird bath, or a bug hotel can attract beneficial creatures and add a touch of whimsy to your garden.
A bug hotel.
Yeah.
That sounds adorable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got our sunlight mapped out, our soil tested, our native plants chosen, our water-wise zones planned, and our wildlife havens envisioned. What's next on our eco-friendly gardening checklist?
Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty, the heart of it all, nourishing the soil.
All right.
This is where the real magic happens.
All right, let's get our hands dirty. I'm ready to delve into the secrets of healthy soil.
You know, healthy soil is like a bustling city teeming with life. There are billions of microorganisms doing incredible things down there.
Hmm?
And the best way to keep this underground city thriving, composting.
Composting.
It's not just about reducing waste. It's about feeding the soil with nature's own fertilizer.
I have to admit, it's always intimidated me a bit.
Yeah.
I picture smelly piles of rotting food attracting all sorts of unwanted critters.
I get it.
Yeah.
But trust me, composting can be surprisingly easy
Okay.
and way less smelly than you might think. We'll debunk some of those composting myths and break again into simple steps you can actually follow.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
What kind of things can we actually compost?
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's more than just banana peels and coffee grounds, right?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. Almost all your kitchen scraps can be transformed into what I like to call garden gold.
Okay.
Think veggie peels, eggshells, even shredded newspaper.
Wait, newspaper too? I never would have thought of that.
Yep. It's all about finding that perfect balance of carbon-rich, Browns, like dry leaves and newspaper, and nitrogen-rich greens, like kitchen scraps. And don't worry, we'll talk about what not to compost as well.
Okay.
Things like meat and dairy products that can attract unwanted guests and create a less than pleasant aroma.
Noted. No raccoon buffets in my compost bin. But what if I don't have a backyard for a traditional compost pile? I live in an apartment with a tiny balcony. Does that mean I'm out of luck?
Absolutely not. There are plenty of options for small spaces,
Okay.
from countertop compost bins to something called worm farms.
Worm farms. Okay, you're going to have to elaborate on that one.
Imagine a mini ecosystem where worms are the stars of the show.
Okay.
They break down your kitchen scraps and create this incredibly nutrient-rich compost that's like a superfood for your plants. It's odorless, compact, and honestly pretty fascinating to watch.
Okay, worm farms are officially on my to-do list.
Yeah.
But what happens once we have all this beautiful compost? How do we use it in the garden?
Compost is like a multivitamin for your soil. It adds essential nutrients, improves the soil structure so it can better hold water, and even helps fight off plant diseases. You can mix it into your garden beds, use it as a top dressing, or even brew compost tea.
Compost tea.
Yeah,
You're really speaking my language. Tell me more about this magical elixir.
it's exactly what it sounds like, steeping compost in water to extract those valuable nutrients and create a liquid fertilizer. It might not smell the best, but trust me, your plants will be thanking you for it.
Okay, I'm sold. So we're swapping chemical fertilizers for compost tea and worm castings. This is what I love about eco-friendly gardening. It's all about finding natural solutions that work with nature, not against it.
You're getting it. And it's not just about what you add to the soil, it's also about what you don't add.
Okay.
Chemical fertilizers can actually harm those beneficial microorganisms we're trying to cultivate in the soil.
So we're nurturing that underground city, feeding it with compost, and avoiding those chemical disruptors. Makes sense. But what about dealing with pests? Surely we don't have to resort to those harsh chemicals, right?
Absolutely not. There's a whole arsenal of natural and effective ways to control pests, and we'll dive into those in part 2.
Okay.
Think beneficial insects, companion planting, and even some homemade concoctions that will make those pests wish they'd never set foot in your garden.
Okay, I'm already intrigued.
Yeah.
But before we move on to the pest control battlefield, I have one more question about soil health.
Sure.
What about those pesky weeds? Do I have to resign myself to hours of backbreaking weeding?
Weeding is definitely a reality of gardening, but we can make it a lot easier on ourselves.
Okay.
Have you ever considered using mulch?
Mulch. I know it's good for suppressing weeds, but does it actually benefit the soil as well?
Think of mulch as a superhero with multiple superpowers. Not only does it block those pesky weeds from seeing the light of day, but it also acts like a cozy blanket for your soil, helping it retain moisture and regulate temperature.
So mulch is basically the ultimate soil protector.
Exactly. And as it breaks down, it adds organic matter to the soil, further enriching it.
Okay, I'm starting to see a theme here.
Yeah.
Eco-friendly gardening is all about using what nature provides, recycling those leaves and grass clippings as mulch, brewing our own compost tea, and basically turning our gardens into these self-sustaining ecosystems.
You've got it. It's about closing the loop, minimizing waste, and working with nature's rhythms to create a garden that's both beautiful and sustainable.
All right, I'm feeling pretty empowered to tackle soil health like a pro.
Good.
What's next on our eco-friendly gardening adventure?
Let's talk about water, shall we?
Okay.
It's the lifeblood of any garden,
Yeah.
but it's also a precious resource that we need to conserve.
Water conservation is definitely top of mind for me. So how do we strike that balance between keeping our gardens hydrated and being mindful of our water usage?
Rainwater harvesting is a great place to start. Have you ever considered installing a rain barrel?
I've seen them around, but I've always assumed they were, like, complicated to set up.
Not at all. They're surprisingly easy to install,
Okay.
and they can make a huge difference in your water bill and your garden's health.
Okay, tell me more. How do these magical rain barrels work?
It's actually quite simple. You basically attach the barrel to your downspout, and voila.
Okay.
Every time it rains, the barrel collects that precious rainwater,
Yeah.
which you can then use to water your plants.
It's free water. I'm sold. Any tips for making rain barrels even more efficient or stylish?
You can get creative with it, add a spigot for easier access, or even paint the barrel to match your garden's aesthetic.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a backyard for a full-blown rain barrel, you can still collect rainwater in a simple bucket placed under a downspout.
Love that. Every drop counts. Right. But what about when we do need to water our plants?
Yeah,
Are there any techniques we can use to make sure we're not wasting water?
absolutely. One of the most efficient watering methods is drip irrigation. Instead of spraying water everywhere, it delivers water directly to the roots of your plants, minimizing evaporation and runoff.
Drip irrigation sounds like a great option, but is it difficult to set up?
It's simpler than you might think.
Okay.
You can even create a DIY drip irrigation system using old soaker hoses or recycled plastic bottles.
Upcycling for the win. I love how eco-friendly gardening encourages us to be creative and resourceful.
It's all about finding those clever solutions that benefit both our gardens and the planet. But before we get carried away with watering techniques, let's talk about the plants themselves.
Okay.
Choosing the right plants can make a huge difference in your garden's water needs.
Okay, so it's not just about how we water, but also what we water. What kind of plants should we be looking for if we want to conserve water?
Drought-tolerant plants are your new best friends. Think succulents, native grasses, Mediterranean herbs. They've evolved to thrive in drier conditions, so they won't be begging for a drink every 5 minutes.
Drought-tolerant plants. That sounds like a win-win. I love their, unique textures and low-maintenance vibes.
Exactly. And here's another water-saving tip. Timing is everything. Watering in the cool of the morning or evening minimizes evaporation,
Okay.
so your plants can actually soak up that precious H2O.
Avoiding that midday sun when it comes to watering.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Any other water-saving wisdom you want to impart?
Don't be afraid to reuse water sources.
Okay.
That pasta water you'd normally pour down the drain,
Uh-huh.
let it cool down,
Yeah.
and it becomes liquid gold for your plants.
Cost of water for plants. Mind blown. I'm starting to realize that eco-friendly gardening is all about thinking outside the box and finding those creative solutions that are often right under our noses.
Exactly. It's a constant learning process, but it's incredibly rewarding to see your garden thrive while minimizing your impact on the environment.
All right, we've covered planning, soil health, and water conservation.
Mm-hmm.
What's next on our eco-friendly gardening journey?
Now it's time to talk about the stars of the show, the plants themselves.
Okay.
And let's be honest, it's not just about aesthetics. The choices we make about what we plant can have a huge impact on the ecosystem.
I'm ready to level up my plant selection game. Where do we start?
Think of it like building a diverse community in your garden.
Okay.
We want a mix of native plants, drought-tolerant superstars, edible delights, pollinator-friendly beauties, and even some hardworking ground covers.
Okay, this sounds like a pretty awesome plant party.
Yeah.
Let's break it down, starting with native plants. We touched on them earlier, but why are they so essential for an eco-friendly garden?
They're the VIPs of the local ecosystem. Native plants provide food and shelter for local wildlife, attract beneficial insects, require less water and fertilizer, and they're naturally adapted to your area's climate.
So they're basically low-maintenance, eco-friendly superstars.
You got it.
Yeah.
And they come in a dazzling array of shapes, sizes, and colors, so you can find native plants to suit any garden style.
Okay, I'm officially a native plant convert. What about drought-tolerant plants?
Yeah.
Those seem like a no-brainer for water conservation.
They're the water-wise champions of the plant world. From succulents to lavender to native grasses, these guys can handle a little bit of dryness without breaking a sweat.
I love that. So we're talking beautiful, fragrant, and water-wise. What's not to love?
Exactly. Now let's talk about the edible delights. Is there anything more satisfying than growing your own food?
I completely agree. Nothing beats the taste of a sun-ripened tomato straight from the vine.
Plus, growing your own food reduces your carbon footprint by cutting down on those food miles and packaging waste.
Okay, so edible plants are a must-have in any eco-friendly garden. What about those pollinator-friendly beauties? I love seeing bees buzzing around my garden.
Yeah. Pollinators are essential for a healthy ecosystem, and by planting a variety of flowers that bloom throughout the season, we can create a buffet for these buzzing beauties.
A pollinator buffet, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of flowers are we talking about?
Think bright colors, diverse shapes, and a mix of native and non-native varieties that bloom at different times throughout the season.
So we're aiming for a vibrant and constantly evolving floral feast. I'm all for that. What about ground covers? They always seem to be overlooked.
Ground covers are the unsung heroes of the garden.
Oh.
They prevent soil erosion, suppress weeds, regulate soil temperature, and some even add nitrogen to the soil.
So they're like a living mulch.
Exactly.
Okay.
Plus, they come in a variety of textures and colors, so you can have fun with them and create some really interesting visual effects in your garden.
This is all so helpful. Okay, so we've got our 5 key categories. Native plants, drought-tolerant plants, edibles, pollinator-friendly plants, and ground covers. Any other tips for choosing the right plants for an eco-friendly garden?
Avoid invasive species like the plague.
Okay,
These plants can quickly take over your garden, outcompeting native plants and disrupting the balance of your local ecosystem.
good point. It's all about creating a harmonious and sustainable garden, not a plant dictatorship.
Exactly. And remember, have fun with it. Experiment with different plant combinations. See what thrives in your garden. And don't be afraid to get your hands dirty.
That's what I love about gardening, is a constant learning process, and there's always something new to discover.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we've covered planning, soil health, water conservation, and plant choices. What else do we need to know to create a truly eco-friendly garden?
Well, there's still much more to explore. In part 2, we'll dive deeper into natural pest control, those creative recycling and upcycling ideas, and some low-effort maintenance tips that will make your eco-friendly garden a joy to care for.
I can't wait. Stay tuned, listeners, for part 2 of our deep dive into eco-friendly gardening.
Right.
We'll be back soon with more tips, tricks, and inspiration to help you create a garden that's both beautiful and beneficial to the planet. Welcome back to our deep dive into eco-friendly gardening. In part 1, we laid the groundwork with planning, soil health, and water conservation.
Right.
Now I'm ready to tackle those uninvited gardy guests, the pests.
Yes, the pests, every gardener's nemesis. But before you reach for the chemical warfare,
Yeah?
let's explore the fascinating world of natural pest control.
I'm all ears. I've tried those chemical sprays before, and honestly, they always made me feel a little uneasy.
Yeah.
Plus, they often seem to kill the beneficial insects along with the bad guys.
That's the problem with those broad-spectrum pesticides. They don't
Yeah.
discriminate.
Yeah.
They wipe out everything, disrupting the natural balance of your garden's ecosystem.
Okay, so how do we approach pest control in a more eco-friendly way?
It's all about understanding that a truly healthy garden is naturally more resistant to pests.
Okay.
We need to shift our mindset from, fighting pests to creating a resilient ecosystem.
Creating a resilient ecosystem. I love that. But how do we actually do that?
Well, we've already talked about building healthy soil, choosing the right plants, and conserving water.
Right.
All of these practices contribute to a stronger, more balanced garden that's less susceptible to pest infestation.
So it's like we're building up the garden's immune system.
Exactly. But even in the most balanced gardens, a few pests are bound to show up. It's nature's way.
Yeah.
The key is to manage those pests without resorting to harmful chemicals.
Okay, I'm ready to learn some natural pest control strategies. What's our first line of defense?
Remember those beneficial insects we talked about in part 1? Ladybugs, lacewings, praying mantises. These guys are like tiny assassins taking out aphids, mites, and other soft-bodied pests with incredible precision.
That's like having a secret army of, pest control ninjas patrolling our gardens.
Exactly. And the best way to recruit these beneficial insects is to provide them with food and shelter. Planting a diverse mix of flowering plants, especially those with small open flowers, will attract these helpful predators.
So we're creating a pollinator buffet that doubles as a pest control headquarters.
You got it. And if you need a more immediate boost to your beneficial insect population, you can purchase ladybugs or praying mantis egg cases and release them into your garden.
Okay, so we're attracting the good guys. But what about when those pesky critters do show up?
Right.
What are some natural ways to deal with them?
Well, there are several options.
All right.
One is to use DIY sprays made with common household ingredients. For example, a simple garlic and chili spray can work wonders for deterring pests.
Garlic and chili. That sounds more like a recipe for my dinner than pest control.
Trust me, it works. The pungent aroma sends those pests running for cover.
Okay, I'm willing to try it. Any other DIY spray recipes you want to share?
A mild soap solution can be surprisingly effective for soft-bodied pests like aphids.
Okay.
Just mix a tablespoon of liquid soap with a quart of water and spray it directly on the affected plants.
Soap and water.
Yeah.
So simple, yet so effective. Are there any other natural pest control methods we should know about?
Neem oil is another great option.
Okay.
It's a natural pesticide derived from the neem tree, and it's effective against a wide range of pests, including aphids, mites, and even fungal diseases. Neem oil. Got it. But doesn't using any kind of pesticide, even a natural one, disrupt the balance of the ecosystem?
That's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important to use neem oil sparingly and only when absolutely necessary. Remember, a few pests are perfectly natural and even beneficial to your garden's ecosystem.
Right.
We're not aiming for a sterile environment.
Right. It's all about finding that balance. But what about those creatures that are a bit bigger than insects? We're
Yes.
talking about those four-legged garden invaders like rabbits and squirrels.
Ah, yes, those furry bandits can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
But there are eco-friendly ways to deter them as well. For example, you can plant herbs with strong scents, like rosemary and lavender,
Okay.
around your garden's perimeter.
So we're creating a fragrant barrier that those furry critters find unappealing.
Exactly. You can also try using physical barriers, like netting or fencing, to protect vulnerable plants. Okay, so we're attracting beneficial insects, using DIY sprays, planting pest-deterrent herbs, and even employing physical barriers. It sounds like a multifaceted approach is key to natural pest control.
You've got it. It's all about being observant, identifying the specific pests you're dealing with, and then choosing the most appropriate and eco-friendly methods for managing them.
This is all so helpful. I'm feeling much more equipped to handle those garden invaders now.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears for a moment. I'm really intrigued by those recycling and upcycling ideas you mentioned earlier. How can we incorporate those principles into our gardens?
Well, for starters, think about all those materials you might normally discard. Plastic bottles, old tires, wooden pallets.
Right.
These can all be repurposed into creative and functional garden elements.
Okay, I'm already picturing those like Pinterest-worthy upcycled garden projects.
Huh?
Give me some specific examples.
Plastic bottles can be transformed into mini greenhouses for seedlings or even DIY drip irrigation systems.
Oh, wow.
Old tires can become quirky planters, and wooden pallets can be upcycled into vertical gardens or compost bins.
This is blowing my mind. I never would have thought of using old tires as planters.
It's all about seeing the potential in everyday objects and giving them a new life. And it's not just about like big statement pieces.
Right.
Even something as simple as using broken mugs as mini pots for herbs or succulents can add a touch of whimsy and sustainability to your garden.
I love that. It's all about being resourceful and creative.
Yeah.
But what about those single-use plastics that seem to be everywhere in gardening? Are there eco-friendly alternatives for things like plant markers and pots?
Absolutely. You can use upcycled wine corks or sticks as plant markers.
Yep.
They add a rustic charm to your garden and help you keep track of your plants without relying on plastic.
Rustic charm, I love it.
Yeah.
What about those plastic pots?
Instead of buying plastic pots for seedlings, try using biodegradable pots made from newspaper, eggshells, or coconut coir.
Biodegradable pots.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
And instead of using plastic grow bags, consider switching to cloth grow bags.
Okay.
They're better for your plant's roots and can be reused for years.
Cloth grow bags, biodegradable pots, upcycled tire planters. I'm feeling so inspired to transform my garden into an eco-friendly haven.
That's what we love to hear.
Yeah.
And remember, it's not just about what you bring into your garden, but also about how you manage the waste that's generated.
You mean like those pruned branches and fallen leaves?
Yeah.
What do we do with all that stuff?
Well, we've already talked about composting, but you can also use those pruned branches to create natural supports for climbing plants,
Okay.
or even build a rustic fence.
Okay.
And those fallen leaves,
Yeah.
they make fantastic mulch.
Free mulch. I love it.
Yeah.
It's amazing how eco-friendly gardening encourages us to see everything as a potential resource.
Exactly. It's about closing the loop, minimizing our impact on the planet, and creating a garden that's in harmony with nature.
I'm so on board with that.
Yeah.
But before we get carried away with all these exciting projects,
Yeah.
I have to ask, how do we maintain an eco-friendly garden without turning it into a full-time job?
That's a great question. And the answer is, it's actually easier than you might think.
Okay.
Many of the practices we've discussed,
Yeah.
like building healthy soil, choosing the right plants, and mulching, actually simplify garden maintenance in the long run.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I'm all about working smarter, not harder in the garden. But are there any specific low-effort maintenance tips you can share?
Let's start with tools.
Okay.
Are you still using a gas-powered lawnmower?
Guilty as charged. But I'm open to more eco-friendly options.
Consider switching to a manual reel mower or an electric mower.
Okay.
They're quieter, produce zero emissions, and can actually be a great workout.
All right. I'm willing to trade my gas guzzler for a little bit of exercise and fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
What about fertilizers? We talked about compost and compost tea,
Mm-hmm.
but are there any other low-effort fertilization
Mhm.
methods?
One of my favorites is chop and drop pruning.
Yeah.
Instead of discarding your plant clippings, simply chop them up and leave them on the soil surface as mulch. They'll decompose and release nutrients back into the soil, creating a natural fertilization system.
So we're turning those prunings into free fertilizer. Love it.
Yeah, and have you ever heard of compost lasagna?
Compost lasagna. Now that sounds delicious, but I have a feeling it's not the kind of lasagna I'm thinking of.
You're right about that. It's a no-cook lasagna for your garden beds.
Okay.
You basically layer different organic materials like leaves, grass clippings, and kitchen scraps directly on the soil. As these materials decompose, they create a rich, fertile layer that nourishes your plants.
Okay, that's a much better kind of lasagna than I was picturing.
Uh-huh.
It sounds like a great way to improve soil fertility without a lot of effort.
Mm-hmm. And here's a slightly more unconventional fertilization method if you're feeling adventurous. Pea cycling.
Hold on. Pea cycling. Are you suggesting IR?
Diluted urine is actually a great source of nitrogen for your plants.
Okay.
Just mix 1 part urine with 10 parts water and use it to water your nitrogen-loving plants like tomatoes and leafy greens.
Okay, that's definitely a new one for me. I'll have to try that out. Discreetly, of course.
Yeah.
But beyond fertilization, what are some other ways to make garden maintenance more eco-friendly and less time-consuming?
Remember, adapting to the seasons is key.
Okay.
In the spring, consider planting cover crops like clover to protect your soil and add nutrients. In the summer, mulch heavily to retain moisture and suppress weeds. In the fall, leave some leaves as mulch to provide overwintering habitat for beneficial insects. And in the winter, embrace the opportunity to plant cold, hardy vegetables like garlic or kale.
So we're working with nature's rhythms to create a more sustainable and resilient garden.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to embrace imperfection.
Okay.
Remember that a little bit of wildness is good for biodiversity and creates a more welcoming habitat for wildlife.
So we're letting go of the need for absolute control and embracing the natural beauty of a slightly wilder garden.
Precisely. And most importantly, don't be afraid to experiment. Try different techniques, see what works in your garden, and have fun with it.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's all about connecting with nature, getting our hands dirty, and creating a beautiful and sustainable space that benefits both us and the planet.
Well said.
Yeah.
And speaking of connecting with nature,
Yeah.
I think it's time for us to move on to part 3 of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've covered so much ground already in our exploration of eco-friendly gardening, from soil superheroes to water wizards and even pest control ninjas.
It's been quite the adventure. We've explored practical tips and techniques for creating gardens that are not only beautiful, but also beneficial to the environment.
But beyond the practicalities, there's something deeper here, isn't there?
Yeah.
This connection between gardening and sustainability feels almost like spiritual at times.
I couldn't agree more. There's a profound sense of interconnectedness that comes with tending a garden, especially when you're working in harmony with nature.
I know what you mean. When I'm out in my garden, hands in the soil, like planting seeds, watching things grow, it's like I'm tapping into some ancient rhythm of life.
It's like we're becoming part of the natural world again, reconnecting with something that's been lost in our modern technology-driven lives.
And when we embrace eco-friendly gardening practices, it goes beyond just creating a beautiful space.
Yeah.
It's about making conscious choices that ripple outwards, impacting the planet in a positive way.
Exactly. We're reducing our reliance on chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which not only benefits the health of our gardens, but also protects our waterways and the wider ecosystem.
And we're creating habitats for pollinators and other beneficial wildlife, contributing to biodiversity and the overall health of the planet.
Right.
It's amazing to think that our little gardens can actually make a difference.
They absolutely can. Every step we take toward a more sustainable garden is a step toward a healthier world.
It's empowering to realize that we don't have to wait for governments or big corporations to, make change happen.
Right.
We can start right here, right now in our own backyard.
Precisely. And, beyond the environmental benefits, there's something deeply rewarding about eco-friendly gardening on a personal level. It's a way to slow down, connect with nature, and find peace and tranquility in the midst of our busy lives.
I feel that. There's something so grounding about getting your hands dirty, working with soil, nurturing life. It's almost meditative.
It's like a form of therapy, a way to reconnect with our roots and find solace in the beauty and resilience of the natural world.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I'm walking away with a newfound appreciation for, the interconnectedness of it all.
Yeah.
The power of working with nature and the joy of creating a garden that's both beautiful and sustainable.
And remember, you don't have to be an expert gardener or have a huge backyard to make a difference. Start small, experiment, have fun, and enjoy the journey. Every seed you plant, every drop of water you conserve, every beneficial insect you attract is a step in the right direction.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into eco-friendly gardening. We hope you've gleaned some valuable insights and inspiration to transform your own gardens into havens for both yourself and the planet. Happy gardening!